I'm John Wensveen, the Chief Innovation Officer of Nova Southeastern University and Executive Director of the Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation. We are building a brand new economic development engine in the form of an innovation center for Broward County and South Florida, focused on the entrepreneurial journey around the themes of innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship, and our more recent addition, space. Today we are with the Florida Panthers in Sunrise, Florida, in beautiful Broward County here in South Florida, and I am so happy and pleased to be with this esteemed panel. We have Matt Caldwell, the CEO of the Florida Panthers. Then we have Bryce Holwood, the Executive Vice President, and Sam Doerr, the Chief Strategy Officer. What we're going to do today is talk about sports tech and try to bring it down to the level of the Florida Panthers, and we're going to get into a deeper discussion in terms of innovation and how we address the emerging scenes that are going on around the trends, challenges, opportunities, and strategies, primarily around the form of technology. So I look forward to a really great discussion, and what I'd like to do to open it up is I'd like to start with Matt, and then we'll go down the line. You all have very interesting backgrounds and all have different journeys in terms of where you are right now. And what I'd really like to do is open it up and talk a little bit about your personal journey and professional journey as to how you got to the seat that we're sitting in here today and how I'm so lucky to actually be able to do this. And before we begin, you should note that I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. I grew up on the ice, around the ice. And I'm wearing one of my Heroes jerseys today. You can't see it, but the logo here on the back. And I never thought that I'd actually be sitting here in a conversation with the Florida Panthers. So this is really exciting in terms of my own journey of how I got here.
Well, thank you, John. I certainly didn't think I'd be sitting here either, being the CEO of a sports team. And thank you for that very kind introduction. Bryce Holwood, who's at the end here, is from Vancouver. So he was just with the Canucks recently. So I think you'll get a kick out of some of his comments, being from Canada, but growing up with youth hockey here in the U.S. and challenges involved. So, well, thank you again for having me. The personal journey all started in New York City. You can probably tell from my accent, from Staten Island. That hasn't left me. Grew up there with my family. My dad was a cop in New York and had a great upbringing, great family, great support system. Went to West Point for my undergrad, so served in the military. I know we just hit our 20-year mark from 9/11, and I was a senior at West Point when that happened, and changed my life, Bryce as well. And after I graduated that year, I spent a lot of time overseas. I was in Iraq for a year. I was in Kosovo for a year, and a lot of other kind of small hotspots. So, tremendous experience. I got out. I went back to grad school. I got my business and law degree. Very quickly learned I wanted to go into business, not law. Law's great. Wasn't for me long term. Wound up working in finance on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs, and then met Vincent Viola, the owner of the team, and that also changed my life tremendously, because what started as helping him with his investment portfolio, landed me here today. I think Vinny, more than anyone I know, values innovation, entrepreneurship. So while we're a very big organization here, we'll talk to you a lot about how we've started new companies, how we've tried different things in a non-traditional hockey market. That's been a big reason why Sam has joined us. Very smart, very strategic as our Chief Strategy Officer, and he's also helping us vet new business opportunities now. So and I'll let them. I can go all day, so I'll go to Sam now.
Well, I would love it if you did go all day, but number one, thank you for your service. And one of the things that I really admire about the Florida Panthers as an organization is your support for military, and greatly appreciate that. And it's something that brings a tear to the eye every time I come to a game, so thank you.
Thank you.
So Sam, on to you.
Yeah, my background probably not as interesting or diverse of Matt's. I've kind of been in sports my whole life. My dad worked in pro sports, so I started in pro sports, started at the University of Akron, and then really started to kind of grind my teeth with the San Antonio Spurs. For my money, probably one of the best run sports organizations. So learned a ton there. I just tried to not mess up, because they kind of give you everything you need to succeed. And so learned a lot about structure and just the way to go about business with the Spurs. Then thought I wanted to be a college athletic director. So I went to South Dakota State University to be an assistant AD there, and quickly learned college was a lot different than pro sports, and decided to go back the pro sports route. Was lucky enough to actually be invited back by the Spurs to start their soccer team for them. So was employee one, built their brand, built kind of the front office, did the soccer operations, and great experience for a great franchise. Sales and marketing was my background, and then it eventually grew into data, analytics, strategy, innovation. And so we built up San Antonio FC, was recruited to Phoenix to start a soccer club there called Phoenix Rising, which Didier Drogba, kind of a global soccer superstar, was going to go play there and was part owner. And did that for 3 seasons in a really tough, non-traditional market, kind of like here, competing against the big boys, the Suns, the Coyotes, the D-backs, the Cardinals. And we had a lot of success, and so the Coyotes recruited me over to head up kind of innovation and strategy for them. And while I was there, we actually did 2 or 3 innovation challenges with Arizona State University. I directed the sports innovation board at ASU. So very excited about this and what we can do down here. And then was lucky enough to kind of get recommended to the Panthers with Matt and the Viola family. And hopefully, the rest is history.
So you really do have a diversified background across all kinds of different arenas, and I can only imagine that history really aids you in your position that you're in now.
Yeah, I think knowing all the different business units is very helpful, knowing marketing, sales, data, analytics, sponsorships, because they all have to work together. And usually the biggest issue in any business, but definitely in sports organizations, is silos amongst those departments. And so being able to bridge those gaps is key. And then having the college pro experience, but also like a minor league and Big Four experience is important, because they all have their own challenges.
Right. Well, thank you for the great job that you're doing. And Bryce.
Yeah, don't let Sam fool you. He's one of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life.
Interesting man in the world.
So my journey starts in Los Angeles, born of a Canadian mother from Vancouver. Met my dad there, and they decided to put us in the most unreasonable Southern California sport in the early 80s, which was ice hockey. So that made their lives devoted to the sport as well. At some point we realized we needed to move either out east or up north, and chose to land back in Vancouver. My brother and I played junior hockey. He had a good career in the NHL and played in Europe as well. So I guess it worked out for my parents. I was more reasonable, knowing that I just wanted to get my school paid for, not playing the NHL. So I landed, like Matt, at West Point, which was weird. I had no idea what the school was, really no background, military history in my family, but quickly realized it was the best decision for me in terms of what it meant for the country and service, and the premier leadership institution in the world. Played hockey there, Division I for Army hockey, which was an awesome pleasure. So I was able to continue my dream to play Division I. And then shortly after, spent a good 10 years, most of it pretty good, in the military, ranging from assignments in Belgium, Germany, Afghanistan, Korea, and then ending teaching at Embry-Riddle in the ROTC program in Daytona Beach. 10 years was when I knew it was time to go, and figured, what am I going to do? And I knew I was moving back to Vancouver, because that's where my parents still lived. I had no idea what I was going to do. I had a technology background, being a signal communications officer in the Army. So I said, technology background, love hockey, I'm going to work for the Canucks. And some good timing, a little bit of networking, and landed the role of overseeing technology for the Aquilini Group, which owns the Vancouver Canucks, the arena, and a portfolio of other businesses across multiple industries across Canada and really globally. Did that for about 2 years, and I was really seeking more opportunity on the operational level of sports. So one of the businesses that they run and own and operate is what ended up being 55 Pizza Huts and 12 Dairy Queens. So I did that for a couple years. Excellent experience, really exposed me to the business side. I still had my foot and maybe a little pinky toe in the sports world. They were always consulting me on different aspects of technology throughout their arena and such. The plan was for me to move back into the sports side, and as it would have it, Matt Caldwell came calling, and just really made my dream come true, working in the position that I am right now.
Well, thank you for your service as well. You and I have a lot in common. The Vancouver connection, of course, and my dream as a little kid was to work for the Vancouver Canucks. I knew I was never going to be a hockey player, but my hero growing up was Dave Tiger Williams. He was a scrapper on the ice, and had an opportunity to meet him. He actually bought our house that we lived in at one point in time, and but I was never good enough to be the hockey player that many that are represented here today, say that. And also the Embry-Riddle connection. I was a former professor at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University at one point in time as well. That's actually what brought me to the U.S. via Vancouver, UK, South Florida, Central Florida, North Florida, kind of been all over the place. What I'd like to do now is segue into a discussion on the global pandemic. I know that it's still a daily topic on everybody's radar screen. It's hit every industry. It's hit every person personally. And I'm really curious from the NHL perspective, and then specifically the Florida Panthers perspective, what kind of challenges have you faced and continue to face, and where do we see the world going over the next 6 months, 1 year, or longer? And Matt, we can start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this pandemic has obviously touched the whole world in every industry. You can't avoid it, especially the live entertainment business. So we were completely paralyzed, right? For a year plus. We did not have hockey games, concerts, any of the things that we do here, graduations, which we've worked with Nova before. So it turned our whole world upside down. And other arenas, other teams, concert companies, the Live Nations of the world, they all went through it. So after we got our bearings, after a few months, I thought the league did a great job. They set up, what we refer to as a bubble now. We always knew that word, but we use it in a different context now. And in Toronto and in Edmonton, brought all the teams to finish the season and do an extended playoff. So we got through that, and then being in Florida, we kind of read the tea leaves and banked on the fact that we would probably be able to get fans in earlier than some of the other states or other countries. So we prepared for that. We turned the arena over and went cashless. This is something we wanted to do for a number of years, and it's been one of the silver linings with the pandemic is it's forced you to innovate. You have to survive. You have to go out and make changes. So that was one big one we did. We were already doing mobile ticketing, but we got our own app, which Bryce and Sam have been huge in helping us go to the next level, so that people can do everything on their phones, not have to take a ticket, from a ticket taker, and really not come into contact at all with anyone, which even without COVID, long term helps with ease of convenience and less friction costs, and quite frankly, more transactions for us. So it's a smart business thing to do. As you can imagine, it's a huge technology undertaking. You have to retrain the market. There's plenty of families out there that are used to getting their ticket stubs and going to an arena. So, I can go on and on. So many things that challenges we face. But as I sit here today, I think we've weathered the storm as much as possible, and the season's right on time to start. And I think it'll take fans, especially if they're going to buy bigger packages like season tickets, they're going to take a while because we have to change behavior. People have been mostly confined to their homes and jobs, for the last year and a half or so. So to get back into a flow of coming to 41 games a night will take time. But we have a great product. We leaned into it and made some great hires during the pandemic because we saw that as an opportunity to keep trying to grow and come out of this strong. So I hope it will be.
So I've always thought that the Panthers were an innovative organization to begin with and had a lot of successes. And I think what this pandemic has done is it's forced us to be even more innovative at an accelerated pace. So Sam, I'm curious, as Chief Strategy Officer, innovation is really rooted in strategy. I wonder if you have any comments or thoughts on this.
Yeah, the other day I did an interview with a publication, and I said actually the pandemic kind of exposed who was ready for innovation and strategy and who wasn't. And a lot of times the traditional teams that were having success really didn't need to be innovative or have a ton of strategy because you filled the building, took tickets, you sold food, you had success, right? And so I think when the pandemic hit, actually some of the franchises that probably don't get enough shine or love on the business side, the Coyotes, the Panthers, others, were more prepared a little bit for the pandemic because we were having to do these things just to survive as was. And so it definitely accelerated the growth of a lot of the things Matt talked about, but things that the sports world needed to be doing anyways, but just wasn't, right? In terms of contactless payment, digital ticketing. I could go on and on, data warehouse, things we were doing with consumer data, et cetera. And so I think, you're seeing coming out of the pandemic that teams, business intelligence groups and strategy and innovation groups are probably bigger than ever before, because they learned in the pandemic that if you don't have them and you're not prepared, you can kind of, get exposed. And so it's the work, smarter, not harder, I think, kind of mentality now going forward. And I think you've seen those trends emerge even in, our partnerships world. You look at all the big partnerships, it's in the digital technology, crypto type of space now. And so the pandemic's kind of flipped all of that on its head. And I think from a strategy, innovation, data standpoint, it's a really competitive space now, and there's a ton out there, and you've got to kind of shift through what's important, what's not important, and have a real strategy behind how you're using that data. Consumers are consuming things differently, like Matt said, not only tickets, but content, emails, et cetera. And so I think the pandemic really just forced the sports world to catch up with the rest of the world. And so I think coming out of the pandemic, the sports world's probably better positioned than it was actually going into the pandemic.
That's really interesting. So I know pre-pandemic, the world has been in an age of acceleration and an age of disruption, which has become even more disruptive with what's been going on. And I have to say that as a fan of the Panthers, I made it to numerous games this last season, and despite all of the challenges that we have, I have to say that I'm extremely impressed by the way that the organization handled everything from the ticketing process through the entire pre-game, during game, post-game experience, and had the opportunity to sit in suites as well as down on the ice, front row, and it was a different experience from every angle. But you did a fantastic job being able to control the situation. So I think you all deserve a big pat on the back for that. So as we sort of end this piece of the conversation around the pandemic, Bryce, I wanted to give you an opportunity too, because I think you probably have a similar perspective, but also within your role, maybe even have some other unique perspectives at the same time.
Yeah, I think, as we talk about changing innovation and really digital transformation, which I define as, the integration of technology throughout every aspect of the business, and really the adoption and recognition that technology can improve business practices, generate revenue, and improve a fan experience. So, taking things from my previous roles and industries and coming here and seeing that they were doing things with mobile ticketing, mobile payment, to really create a safe environment, to welcome fans back. I'm not sure if Matt mentioned, we were the first building in pro sports to be well certified, which is a huge feather in the cap for the organization and what it means to provide a safe fan experience for the people who are who are cheering the fellas on the ice.
So for the record, I've been to a number of games over a number of seasons, but I was so impressed with the way that you did handle the environment in which we're currently in. I want to put on record that I got my season tickets last week, and I'm looking very forward to the upcoming season. We gave some teams a run for their money, and all eyes are on the Stanley Cup, and we'll be sitting here cheering you on. So I think in some ways we've already answered this question, but I want to go a little bit deeper into it. The word innovation has really become part of the daily vocabulary, and one of the things that I've been very fortunate to do in my current role over the last year and a half is really engage with a very diverse range of contacts, from academia to industry to government to the investment community to professional and social networks that really make up the South Florida innovation ecosystem and beyond. And we're seeing the effects of local, regional, national, international impact with all of the innovation that's occurring. So from your perspective, if you were to define innovation as it relates to the Panthers, what does it mean to you? I think it's already in the DNA, but is the same definition pre-pandemic, or is it a new definition? We look at things differently, and I'm happy to open this to any of you to respond to that.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start on that. I think that how I would define innovation is really, a lot of organizations will keep doing the same things different, and for us, it's doing different things, taking experiences that we've had and applying them to this experience in order to do different things. I think that technology has influence on how athletes train, how our fans are engaging and consuming the data, and how world-class facilities are now being built and ultimately operated.
So So I love this, and I can talk all day wanting to know more about this, because I think a lot of the strategies that you are most likely developing can be cross-utilized in different types of environments across different types of industry sectors. And I think that's one of the great things in terms of a positive thing that's happening out of the pandemic that is still not near completion, that we get to interchange these ideas, I think, and share them and learn off of one another. And a sports franchise doesn't have to stick with another sports franchise to create new ideas that you can adapt from other industries as they can adapt from you. So that's all really exciting. So as we look towards the future and talk about all these different types of challenges that are occurring as it hits the professional sports world, whether it's hockey in the NHL or it's some other environment, where do you see the future going? Is the nature of the game, and from your perspective, going to change in any way, or are we going to go back to the norm as we used to know it?
I can comment on that. I think the game itself won't change as much. I mean, over the years, we've talked about the game getting faster, less fighting, a little bit more skill and speed, just to very oversimplified. I don't know if there'll be structural changes there, but I think the way people consume sports, which was already changing, and both Sam and Bryce, kind of hinted at this, that there was these underlying trends happening already, and then the pandemic and you'll hear this from anyone who talks about innovation and change, has kind of, sped up that process. So, traditionally people have sat down and watched sports on TV, right? And we know that cable television has been on a slow decline, and the speed of that decline has picked up during the innovation. Now people have multiple screens, whether they have their phone, their iPad, watching multiple games, maybe the TV's on in the background. So we have to respond to that and be ready for streaming and getting our game on our app. And if maybe people just want to watch a game for a little bit, or maybe they want to sit in the stands and roam around and watch the game on their phones, right? So we have to keep coming up with technologies to cater to that audience, because I think the days of someone, you're a great example, diehard fan, bought your 41 tickets, or 41 games to say, season ticket, you signed up, you're in, you're gonna come here, you're gonna be dialed in, sitting in your seat, and you know the game really, really well. I think there'll be few more of those, but we have a lot more casual fans that love interesting content, so the more that we can make this a fun experience, the more that our brand is out there. If you saw this summer, we did a number of sponsorships with the NIL, case that came out, and we reached out to the University of Miami and FAU and some other schools in the region and supported some of their athletes. I mean, that's a way to do the right thing, get our brand out there, but also get to fans that probably weren't coming to games before. So now when they come here, I don't know if they want to sit and learn what icing is. They may want to just come and enjoy the music and walk around, and the more that we can provide a fun experience, we're going to keep growing the fan base.
So you just triggered a thought in my mind. One of the things that I also really admire about the Panthers organization is what you're doing with youth in our community to really get them engaged with what hockey is and into the sport at a young, especially in a sun state where it may not be the first sport that one may think of. So I think you're doing a great job, and there's some great stories that have included one of my personal friends and his son that did something, and the Panthers reached out and changed the nature of his life in terms of what he wants to do with sports. So you've had a significant impact here on our community. What I'd like to do now is talk more about emerging technologies. And there are technologies that we know of that continue to develop. There are technologies that haven't even been created, or they're going to take new evolution as we move into the future. And I'm really curious from any of your perspectives in terms of how emerging technologies are going to impact hockey, the Panthers specifically, as we move forward. And I'm also really curious, can you do something different as a separate organization, or do you fall within a model in which if you're the Panthers, do other teams have to do the same thing that you're doing, and you work in coordination with each other around these emerging tech? It's kind of an open-ended question that you can take really in any direction, but technology is impacting our daily life, and I'd just like to know a little bit more about how it impacts your environment in which you operate.
It's actually a good topic, puck and player tracking. Actually, the league's going to announce pretty soon. I disclose secrets like Matt does, probably prematurely. But there's a significant investment when it comes to puck and player tracking and the data analytics behind that. the NHL is going to be releasing soon that they're going to be investing and paying for all the teams to set up a puck and player tracking system, and what that means for us, and Sam can talk more about really the analytics behind it, but for what that means for me and as a former hockey player too, is we can do things like predict injuries before they happen. So now it's, maybe it's 2 games out versus 14 games out, which obviously equates to dollars at the end of the day. There's other technologies in the physical arena, ingress, egress, and also what I think is really cool, and I've seen a couple demos of it, is the really augmented and virtual reality piece, where, and I'm not saying that we want to do this because we still need to fill the seats, but we can, someday, and I think we're close to that in terms of sports technologies, selling that same glass seat 6 times, for a Super Bowl or a Stanley Cup final game, because just inventory won't allow 100,000 people to come into our arena here. So,
Sam, do you have some thoughts on that too?
Yeah, I think the monetization of technology and data has accelerated as well. So puck and player tracking is great for that, but it's also great to sell to sports betting partners that want that data feed to create prop bets, etc. So I think just in general, the emerging technologies, there's multiple use cases, for them. As Matt said, the casual fan wants to come and say, hey, Barkov's next shot's going to be 98 miles per hour or 95 miles per hour. We can now measure that and offer that to that fan. So, we even see it in the BI world, business intelligence world, in terms of, there used to be some dominant Oracle's core software, et cetera, in terms of who offered what for data warehouses, cohort building, et cetera. Now, there's a plethora of it, and the newest one can do more than the last one could do. It's really an arms race in that regard as well, data visualization, et cetera. So I think at the core of it all, though, is making better informed decisions so your money goes further, but also then to monetize that data and the ROI on that. So I think all of the technologies, whether it be wearable technologies, SaaS-based technologies, are all have that same common thread, is an ROI that's associated with it.
So I'm curious, in preparation for today, somebody asked me a question: is the future of the puck going to change, or is it going to be as we've always known it? Are there going to be sensors in the puck? Is that one of the things that's being looked at?
Yeah, there's chips in the puck. That's the puck tracking, and I think it was last year. The players actually complained the puck didn't feel the same, so they took it out of circulation. They planned on doing it last season, and then some players noticed, which is crazy, that it didn't feel the same. So the league's been committed to making sure it feels the exact same, and hopefully it'll go off this year without a hitch. But there's a chip in the puck that's sending all that data to all the different data feeds.
So when the puck goes over the glass and the fan captures it now, is it a more valuable puck than it used to be?
They're supposed to, and this goes back a couple years ago, sitting in an NHL conference when they were having the first version of these pucks with the chip that Sam was saying that the players made excuses for not scoring goals. But the fan would have the opportunity to bring the puck and return it for, a signed puck or something like that instead of the actual game-used one. But, there's other legalities and considerations that go along with puck and player tracking I think haven't yet been ironed out. Can you use it only in training and practices, or can you use it in games? Because then that becomes, a players' union issue. So I think there's still a couple, and Matt would probably know more on that.
The crazy thing is just how far ahead some sports are on the wearable. Soccer players have worn, they're like bibs forever, right, to track that. And so some of the other sports are catching up, or some of them, may not. You watch, baseball games now, they have stat tracker, how fast the ball's going, spin rate, et cetera. So I think it's almost the league catching up to some of the other leagues that have been doing it for so long. And then, it does tie in sponsorship, right? AWS, Amazon, et cetera, is in this space. And, you talked about the technologies earlier. We were talking about it earlier this morning, but virtual slot signage is now huge, and glass signage, where in the past, if you're at home, it was just what was ever in the ice. Now there's the digital projections that fans at home see, that fans in arena, don't see, that we're monetizing. So I think you'll see more and more ways that teams, because of the pandemic, to make up for the losses of the pandemic, but also the increase of technology, are going to monetize.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, you brought up the question that I think someone asked about the puck, and it's kind of one of the downsides, especially for the casual fan, is just tracking the puck, especially on TV. So the league's looking at a number of ways. Many years ago, if you remember, they tried, some digital tech. Yeah, the blue circle that went around it. It was too fuzzy. It never worked. But it's a fine line. You don't want to put too much technology that takes away from the game experience. But the league knows that the sport. Everyone will say being here in person is just better on TV. Where some other sports, it's kind of easier. Sam was joking. Get red zone for football. It's the best experience, right? As opposed to going to the stadiums. And so, how do we look better on screens? So the league doesn't have any official announcements, but it's a real fine line because you want to be able to show, where the puck is at all times, but it's fast moving and you might take away from the excitement of the game. So
it's interesting when you talk about AR and VR experiences. We're heavily involved in something right now that's really the next evolution of AR and VR that we're going to actually build in the Levan Center of Innovation at NSU over the coming months, and it's called the Volumetric Motion Media Capture Studio. And most people don't even know what it is, but it's the future, and we're bringing it to current day. But the days of the sensors in a suit where you could track the athlete in motion, et cetera, among other different types of environments, it's now transforming into a camera that now becomes the sensor, and so it could be capturing us right now, and then it would spit us out as a digital image on the other end, and you'll not know the difference between us sitting here versus the digital image and the ability to interact. And I'm really curious how that kind of technology will impact different environments like professional sports as an example. So I know there's some research that's now being done that we're somewhat aware of that, and trying to get a better control in terms of what it actually means. But this will be a resource that I think we could probably make available to the Panthers organization just to test it out and see what it does, because there's some amazing things that are about to happen. So when we talk about technology and in the investment into technology, is there a priority list in terms of where we focus our energy and our money? Is it the venue? Is it the way that we sell a ticket? Is it the fan experience? Is it the wearable technology? Is it the analytics? Or is there something that I'm missing? But there's so much that we're throwing spaghetti on a wall and it's sticking, but where are the priority action items for you?
I don't think we have a defined list, but like anything that gets more eyeballs and more people watching us and affiliated with the brand is the better for it. We're still a very growing hockey market. We're not Vancouver or Montreal or New York, but as Sam mentioned before, I think coming out of the COVID crisis, we're well positioned to kind of leap forward and capture new fans, and we're already seeing that in our ticket sales. Winning. The best marketing, the best technology is winning. So now that the team is, has a lot of promise behind it, we got to capitalize on that. So anything that hits around the fan experience and would excite people to engage with us, whether it's on social media or coming on our app, watching games, obviously coming here, anything that can convince us that using that particular technology would increase that likelihood is always the main priority.
So we're going to talk at some point about a corporate innovation challenge as a partnership between the Panthers and the Levan Center of Innovation at NSU. And I'm really curious, this is maybe a challenging question for any of you, but we know where technology is right now in some of the direction that it's taking and the focus areas, but is there an area that's not being thought of right now that really could have a technological solution or application that we just haven't thought about? And I don't know if there's an answer to that, but I'm wondering if you thought about that from your perspectives at all. And again, that's open to anybody that has some thoughts there.
I think if you look where the future's going, and not just in our industry as well, but what I've never personally seen in a sports arena is the use of robots. And that's both front of house, back of house, whether that's delivering food and beverages or if it's cleaning. You see, maybe the floor polishers is probably the most I've seen. But the use of AI more in a physical form rather than the back end in a data analytics form, that people are engaging with a robot, whether could be a security guard in the future or a host pointing people to their seats or even asking a question. I haven't seen it yet in a sports venue personally.
Yeah, I think the F&B space is definitely going the furthest, right? You can go to games now and not interact with anyone to place your order, pick it up, etc. To Bryce's point, the D-backs actually, I think, were the first team to do, it was a very small robot. They were doing like chicken tenders and fries, but like that's becoming automated, especially with kind of some of the staffing issues that are going on. But I think from a fan experience standpoint, it's going to accelerate. Amazon's pouring a ton of money into it, so are some others, where you come to a game, you literally just walk in, it knows your ticket, your seat, you're not scanning your ticket anymore. It knows you're there, it knows you want a soda, it'll put it in your seat. Like, those are the things that are coming and coming soon, especially for premium clients, right? If you're in Lounge 954, you walk in, you won't take your phone out of your pocket. It'll know that who you are. It'll know you have 2 tickets. You'll walk right in. It'll already have your food and drink ready because it'll set off, he's here, this is what he wants, etc. So those are the things that will come quick, probably quicker than people expect. I think, you know, to Matt's point, I remember, because I used to collect them, but like physical tickets, nobody ever wanted to give up, right? That was, you got your ticket book, you did your ticket draft, all that sort of stuff. Now, I mean, nobody has physical tickets. Now tickets are becoming NFTs that then unlock different experiences. So it'll come a lot quicker than we think. I think to Bryce's point, F&B within arenas has probably been the fastest and will continue to be. But I think merch and other things of the sort will come, you know, pretty quickly.
So my mind never shuts off, and I'm always thinking from an entrepreneurial perspective. I love building things and going on and doing it again. And here at the BB&T Center this morning, as I walk out into the actual arena and I'm looking at the ice and I see this empty arena, which I've never had the opportunity to see. It was fascinating to me, and I see the seats and I thought, well, gee, what if there was a sensor in every seat that had the ability to do something from seat time to measurement of something? And I don't know where the world is going with that, but it really leads me to my next question around entrepreneurship. So we're talking about innovation, and it's become a daily word in many people's vocabulary. And it's interesting, the word entrepreneurship is becoming more synonymous with daily conversation as well. So where I'd like to go with this is the Panthers is an extremely entrepreneurial organization. You're innovative, you're incorporating technology. But from the athlete perspective, I'm really curious about the life cycle of the professional athlete. And do you think that they make good entrepreneurs after they have completed their career as a professional athlete? And does the Panthers have anything within the culture, the mindset, the DNA that makes people think like an entrepreneurship so they can be successful while they're with your organization, and then perhaps after they've completed and move on to something else?
It's a great question. I can start with the athletes. I think traditionally, this is just a broad stereotype. I think there's so much work that goes into being a professional athlete, making the team, making the professional level, that a lot of times athletes were singly focused on that, and then your career, probably maybe unfortunately ends between 25, 30 years old, or maybe early 30s. You still have your whole life ahead of you. So I don't think there was a lot of thought that it was all about, hey, I just want to make it to the professional. And not that I've ever been an athlete, just from hearing people talking to coaches and front office personnel. Then there was a little bit of a trend of athletes, joining the broadcast, athletes, retiring and becoming part of the alumni association, or a part of the GM staff, or a scout that goes out and writes reports on other games and players. So that's been a trend. But I think most recently, and we're a good example of this, athletes are stepping back. They have their own brands now, and they're using social media to broadcast and market what they believe in on top of the sport. You saw athletes using their brands during some of the horrific events that happened, in social justice, and they came out and spoke and didn't just play the game, And the NHL sometimes has a head down, just do your job kind of mentality, which is good to a certain extent, but you can rise above and be entrepreneurial and do things outside the sport. We have one of our members of our executive team is Sean Thornton, who you probably remember, 20 years in the NHL, a couple of Stanley Cups, and was one of the old school enforcer. Fights still happen, but teams literally would hire, sign him to be their enforcer for the team. But we got to know him during his last 3 years with us in our locker room, and we saw his leadership, how much he cared about what we were doing on the marketing side. He gave us some great ideas on how we can, get the foundation out there more. And we said, wow, this gentleman's really smart and intellectual and curious. And we hired him on the business side, which is pretty unique. There's only, a handful of athletes that I can think of that played, at least right now in the NHL, that are working in corporate partnerships, working in ticket sales, working with these fine gentlemen to do. And so that's a great example. Roberto Luongo works with us. He's a little bit more traditional on the hockey side, but our new GM, Blvd, is very progressive, very innovative, likes to do things differently. So he's really pushing, Lou, as we call him, to get outside his comfort zone. And we created a goaltending department, which, to a non-passionate hockey fan, you would think that might be obvious because the goaltending is very, very important. But for some reason that I wouldn't know, a lot of times the goaltenders just kind of did their own thing. They kind of sat in the corner, showed up, and they're almost like kickers in football, but they were much more important, I would say. And we've built out a whole department underneath Lou, where we're trying to get as many good goalie prospects because it's such a vital position. And even though we really only generally play one and have a backup, the more that you have, the more you can increase the value of your team and helps with trading and everything else. So, so I'm seeing a lot of innovation from the athletes. On the DNA of the Panthers side, I mean, our owner, I would say he's a patriot first and then an entrepreneur second. Those are like 1 and 1A. He loves the country, loves the military, he's most proud of it, but he loves to do things differently, loves to start businesses. So, we're always encouraged not to do things the way that we have done them, not the way, the franchise did it for 20 years, not even what we did last year. Let's think differently. And we have our own food and beverage business. We have our own retail, like our merchandising. We have all separate, P&Ls for this. But a lot of times, franchises outsource these items, and our parking, our event staff. We want all those people to be a part of the Panthers family. So we've created individual companies where they're under the Panthers umbrella, and we're not bringing in a third party to service our fans. Because again, if a fan has a bad experience, we want to go and talk to the parking attendant, and we don't want to hear, we got to talk to the manager up in New York. We want to say, no, we're the manager, and then I can yell at Sam and Bryce.
I was just going to say, I mean, from an athlete investment standpoint, I think, more and more you see traditionally not hockey players as much. I think it's getting better, but NBA players, obviously A-Rod, which Matt knows well, like they're leading a lot of venture capitalist firms now, or big players in that, and that never happened before, right? You look at what Kevin Durant's done, Steph Curry, LeBron's obviously 1A, A-Rod, et cetera. So they're definitely more involved in that venture capitalist world, and a lot of their investments are in tech, quite frankly. And so they're taking a lot more of their disposable income and investing it, and I think that's been a shift in the last 3, 4, 5 years.
So that's a really interesting point, and I do want to come to you, Bryce, on this as well. But while you got a thought in my mind, I look at the different professional sports leagues that are out there. You often hear stories, particularly around the NBA or the NFL, where an athlete's come in very young, they've made a lot of money, they've lost a lot of money, and they didn't invest it correctly, and they weren't taught to be an entrepreneur or even an intrapreneur within the organization that they work, and they end up doing something maybe they didn't dream of doing later on. I don't hear many stories with that with the NHL, and growing up in Canada, I was very fortunate to spend many of my summers with NHL players that were at the lake hanging out and starting to create new business ideas and concepts and build businesses with each other, which was quite interesting. And that was many, many years ago. And I'm also happy that you brought up Luongo. I was here for Luongo night. I can't remember who they played that night. I can't remember anything, but I remember that it was a sentimental evening, and that was the day I got this shirt, this jersey. And I'm so happy.
Retired his jersey?
Yes, absolutely. And I was so happy to hear that he was continuing to stay on with the organization, and hope that there's a progression for the athlete to stay within that organization because they know it best, and so they're there for the longer duration of the life cycle. But going back to the original question that we started with, did you want to conclude with some
I was
comments
just going
on
to
that?
touch on the original, the first piece of the question on athlete transition, and some of that's I'm pretty passionate about, and it really links very closely with what Matt and I saw in the military, right? You're part of a team. Really, your profession at the time doesn't seem very transferable. Whether that's a football player or a hockey player doing their thing on the ice of the field, they're knocking each other around, or in the military, what we do. But if you peel back a very thin layer, you realize that there's a ton of transferable skills. Everything, being a team player, working hard, perseverance, everything. And it's those things that are starting to, I think, players are starting to become more educated on, and how they can build their brand and transfer those skills that they've lived their whole lives doing.
Yeah, very well said.
And while we're on the subject of leadership and entrepreneurship, I need to congratulate you as well on your Ultimate CEO Award that you've just received. I just saw that yesterday. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I got two more questions that I want to go through. And this next question is really around an innovation challenge. And you may have similar thoughts, you may have different ones, but I do want to ask each one of you this specific question. If I were to give you a magical hockey stick right now, and we are going to create a magical hockey stick somehow, and you wanted to address a very specific challenge to the organization, what would that challenge be? And if we could put that out to the world to say, come and solve that. Look at the entrepreneurs that exist out there. Here's something that we want to address, and we want you to help find a solution to it. What would it be?
It's a good one. Obviously, if I can create something that would just make us win every game, would be amazing. That's the first thing that popped in my head, but I think that's impossible. But when I peel that back, when I talk to our GM, we have a lot of scouts. We have eyeballs and observations on player talent, right? And there's a lot of experience on, can this person skate? Can they shoot the puck? Do they know the game and hockey IQ? There's all these terms that they go through. We have analytics. Sam works a lot on the business side. We have a whole analytics team on the hockey side that kind of looks beyond the game and tries to identify, areas that players may be good at that are undervalued. So we have all of that. But what I was just talking to our GM about this recently. To measure someone's like character and grit, it's such a subjective concept. And people like to just throw it out there. And then when you hear it so much, you're like, okay, this person has character, but can they really play? Right. But ultimately, like the great teams have like this like special X factor, whether the chemistry amongst the team or certain individual players, especially the captain of the team. How you can measure that and predict someone at 15, 16, 17, 18 years old is going to be that player. I find that to be very, very difficult and a huge challenge. And someone can interview well, someone can have a great background, their family's very nice, you go and visit them. But then until you're like in the trenches with them, to use a little bit military term, like, and you're with them day to day, then you're like, wow, I didn't know this person didn't really love the game. They just played it because they were good. Right. Well, that's not good long term. Because if you're going to win at this level, it's so competitive. The skill, the margin of difference in skill is general. I mean, it's a little bit wide, but it's not like the best player is like a totally different planet than the worst player. I mean, they all got there for a reason, but it's usually, and especially in hockey, I mean, your best player only plays like a third of the game, right? So that's not true with the other sports. So you got to find those third, fourth liners and defensemen that just have that character and grit. And it's hard to measure that. So if anyone can figure that out, let us know.
Okay, so we'll work on that. And what you brought up something really important too: skill. Yeah. But passion. And if you don't have the skill and the passion, you're probably not going to be successful.
Not. Yeah. And we've looked at all, like once we have the data of who so let's say someone's Sasha Barkov, right? He's a star. I think anyone would agree. I think it's not subjective anymore. He's a great he just won, the award for the best two-way player. Incredible work ethic, incredible character. But we know that today because it's happened, right. So we can try to measure his characteristics versus someone at 15 or 16 that was similar, but how do we predict that next one? Yeah. There's plenty of people with his skill, but that's what I think raises him up.
So that's what AI, AR, and VR are supposed to do, right? Yeah. Create that crystal ball for the future.
Yeah.
I hope we don't go that far because I like the unpredictativeness of what's going on, and that's part of the game. Bryce, what are your thoughts on this? And then we'll come back to you, Sam.
Really, from my perspective and the areas that I oversee, it would be solving the problem with the psychology of queues. So the airport model, where you get your ticket, you're in a line, and then they just move you to another line, and then you're in 3 more lines before you're at your final destination. And sports stadiums and arenas see this similar phenomenon, where you're getting in, you're waiting in line for merchandise or tickets, and then you're waiting at the VOM to get into your seat, and then doing it over again during each intermission.
Yeah.
And the second and third order effects of us being able to solve that problem, in revenue generation and overall fan experience, helps us out. So there's a lot of what I call random acts of technology that are out there and deployed but those seem to solve one problem, but then create 3 more. So there's something that may help you scan your ticket easier, or doesn't have an attendant there, but then you still have to go through a gate for security and security checks, and until there's that magic arch that just allows you to walk in with your phone in your pocket and it knows who you are with biometrics, and I think we're pretty close to that. That would be my magic hockey stick.
Okay, Sam, you got the magic hockey stick now.
Yeah, well, jokingly, I'd say make the stadium smaller for a lot of reasons, but I can't do that. I think consumer engagement, customer engagement's huge. Just going forward, there's a lot of tools to measure that. But to expand on that, real-time feedback. There's still traditionally surveying happens a ton, right? But it happens quarterly. It happens after a game.
Yeah.
Getting real-time feedback, especially in the sports world, is huge in terms of, how did you like the game presentation that just happened, right? What's your reaction to that? Now, there's a lot of tools out there that, people use or have tried to use or actually have even gotten in trouble for in terms of like facial reaction software, et cetera. But getting that, because a lot of times we'll have back-to-back games, right? And so if you don't improve on what you did the night before, some people the next night it's going to be their first ever Panther game. And if we didn't learn from the night before, but it's really hard to get that real-time feedback, and a lot of times, you can text a number to give feedback or email, but it's not a great way of gauging it, especially depending on who it goes to and how it gets up to the decision maker. So I think that's one. I think attribution is still huge. So you can, with pixels and all sorts of other technology, track, came from codes, et cetera, of where a buyer came from. But you can't necessarily track how that buyer decided to get to that point, right? So if you get served an ad on Facebook, maybe you clicked on it because you saw a billboard the day before that the Panthers won, et cetera. So anything on the consumer journey and being more, able to attribute, did that radio ad really make a difference or not, right? You can't really track that.
Right.
I think is something that would be intriguing.
Great, appreciate that. So I've had the opportunity to be on a number of panels where somebody's asking me the questions, and one of the challenges that I always find where I get a little frustrated is they didn't ask me this, they didn't ask me that. So let's just say this is like a lightning round, if you will. And what's the one thing as it relates to innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, or maybe it's something not even in those categories. What's the one burning thing you got to tell the world that they just need to know about the Panthers?
About the Panthers, with respect to innovation and
Yes.
all that? Yeah. I think that, I don't know how burning this is. It might be a little boring, but it's the truth. I really try to lead. I know Vinny leads like this, and I try to emulate him. I want Sam and Bryce and anyone who comes to works here, Katrina who's here today, to know that to have the courage to go out and make mistakes. There's no consequences for failure. That's a quote that our owner always talks about. Now, obviously, if you were lazy and you didn't work hard and you failed, yeah, we're going to be mad. But if you had a process and you considered different options and you got to a decision, we don't want you saying, well, is Matt gonna like this? Or just go for it. If you have conviction, but when it's wrong, if it's wrong, and a lot of times you look at all the stats, you're probably gonna be wrong more often than you're right. Have no ego around stepping back and saying, okay, I thought this was the case, I've learned from it, let's change gears, let me go tell my boss why this didn't work. A lot of times people are like, oh man, this is the wrong thing, but let me try to make an excuse and defend myself and save my job. And we don't want that. We want courageous people that come here and try new things and have conviction and run them down. And we have this term called physicalize, like, where if you're talking too much, like get out of the room and go, and take some action.
So what I like about what you're saying there is don't be afraid to make mistakes. And it really goes actually with our theme of entrepreneurship, because how many entrepreneurs are successful the first time around? They make mistakes. And I think that the key to success is that you also have to admit that you made the mistake and you learn from it. So I really appreciate the message that you're portraying there. Sam?
Yeah, I think that, we will try or look at anything, to be honest, that can make us better. And that goes for innovation, technology. I mean, it may seem crazy, but there may be a use case that we know of that works. And I think the second point would be, I think you were talking about this earlier, but a lot of, the success that I've had with other teams in the innovation technology space has actually been taking an idea from a different industry and applying it to sports. So if there's some sort of innovation or technology or entrepreneur out there that has something that's working in the finance world or the retail world or whatever it might be, don't think that it can apply to sports, because usually it can, and usually, the best ideas that I have found or things that work actually come from the insurance world or a grocery store or whatever it may be. And so I think that's the biggest thing that teams honestly miss out on, is they don't look for inspiration outside of the sports world. They're just stuck in the sports bubble. And so, we'd love to steal things from other industries, to be quite frank.
So what I love about what you just said is you truly have defined as an individual the innovation mindset. And I come from the aviation background. That's my industry experience. And what I found working specifically in the airline business is every airline just copies the other airline. Yeah. They don't adapt to things outside of their own environment. And it's still true to this day for the most part. It's a very antiquated industry, even though it's one of the most high-profile industries in existence. But I think you've nailed it. And the innovation mindset is something where you have to look at things where there are no rules. And so I'm very happy with that key messaging. So thank you. Bryce, what are your thoughts?
I think for me, it's the direction that we're moving with the investment in technology, business intelligence, analytics, to improve not only our business but the fan experience. I think seeing technology over the years where it may have more be seen as a support mechanism. Technology is now a driver and an enabler of operations. It's really the mechanism that can transcend borders and connect to multiple audiences and drive innovation. So it's no longer that support, it's really the driver of everything that we do on a daily basis.
Great.
If I can just second that real quick, just because I've seen this so many times in various industries where people say, oh, we want to be innovative, we want to invest in technology, so they hire a techie or a tech guy, and that man or woman sits in the corner, and you call them and you need something, and then I saw it in sports well before our current regime, but we want analytics, it's going to be a tool in the toolbox, so we hire an analytics person, and that person's thrown in that corner. I hope you can see here, we've taken technology and analytics and strategy and put it in the core of our executive team so that we're pushing it and driving it. And it dawned on me here, and Bryce say that, and then you have folks like Sean Thornton and myself that are in other areas that are helping a little bit more on the client side. We're trying to get I'm not saying we've perfected it, but we're trying to get the right diversified team.
I think too, real quick on that, from a technology standpoint, is you can have all these fancy tools, but if you don't know how to use them, or organizationally you don't make it important that everybody knows how to use them, they're not worth anything, right? So I think at a lot of places that I've been, I'll use Tableau as an example. You have company-wide licenses, and 2 people have used Tableau. Probably not the best tool if the whole company doesn't know how to use it, can't access it, et cetera. And so, one of the things we've done is actually renamed our business intelligence analytics group to Panther Insights. It's a little less daunting for everybody. It's more of a resource to go to for help. So I think, all the technology, all the tools you have, they're not any good if you don't use them or know how to use them.
Yeah. Well, that's great. It's kind of, I having this discussion the other day with somebody. They have the best website in the world, but they can't figure out why it doesn't work because they haven't driven traffic to the website. And so that goes with your analogy, right, of having the tools, but if nobody knows how to use them, then that's a challenge. So I want to thank all of you for your time today. I know you're crazy busy as we prepare for the beginning of the season. The theme of today has been around sports tech, but it's actually been a lot more than that. But we've addressed a number of trends and challenges and opportunities, and I think even discussed some strategies to some of those challenges. And we look forward to working with you in terms of a corporate innovation challenge and trying to figure out how we can assist you in the community to be even better at what you do. And so excited for the upcoming hockey season, and I think this is the year, and wishing you the best of luck. And the Florida Panthers are a great community partner, not just as an entertainment venue, but a great partner in terms of what you're doing to give back specifically to Broward County and South Florida, and we greatly appreciate it. And I got kind of bumps today just sitting here because I just can't believe that I'm sitting in front of cameras and lights with all of you. So it's pretty much a dream come true for me. It's the next best thing to being able to say I made it to the NHL. So thank you again, and greatly appreciate it.
Of course, yes. Appreciate the passion. Thank you.